The smell of old books and betrayal hung thick in my shop that Tuesday morning. I'm Gregory Hayes, 45 years old, owner of Hayes Antiquarian Books in the heart of Millbrook, New York. 20 years I'd been married to Serena Bell, museum curator extraordinaire, and 20 years I'd been slowly suffocating in our Victorian house on Elm Street. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Another antique convention? I asked, watching my wife pack her designer suitcase with clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wore when she meant business, and her green eyes avoided mine completely. The Northeastern Antiquities Symposium, she said, not looking up from folding a black silk nightgown I'd never seen before. 3 days in Boston. You know how important these networking events are for the museum. Right. The Bell Museum, named after her grandfather, where she curated dusty artifacts and played politics with wealthy donors. Where she'd been working late more nights than I could count, coming home with stories about budget meetings and exhibition planning that sounded rehearsed. Sure thing, honey. Say hi to all those crusty old professors for me. I tried to keep the sarcasm light, but something in her posture made my stomach twist. She finally looked at me, and for just a second, I saw guilt flicker across her face before the professional mask slipped back into place. I'll be back Thursday evening. Tommy can handle the shop if you need anything. Tommy Martinez was my 20-something employee, a local college dropout with a gift for finding rare books, and an even better gift for reading people. Kid could spot a fake first edition from across the room and a liar from even farther. After Serena left in her pristine BMW, I found myself staring at the coffee ring stains on our kitchen table, thinking about how we used to talk for hours over breakfast. Now we barely managed good morning. The bell above my shop door chimed around 10, and Tommy shuffled in with his usual cup of coffee and skeptical expression. "Boss, you look like someone stole your favorite bookmark," he said, settling behind the counter with his laptop. "Let me guess, another business trip for the missus?" Boston, Antique Symposium. I tried to focus on cataloging a new shipment of mystery novels, but my hands kept shaking. Tommy snorted. "Right. Hey, speaking of suspicious behavior, you ever notice how your wife's been super weird with her phone lately? Like hiding it when she texts, taking calls in the other room?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, last week when she stopped by, her phone buzzed like 15 times during our 5-minute conversation. She kept flipping it face down and getting all jumpy. Plus, she had this second phone in her purse. Saw it when she was digging for her keys. A second phone. My wife, who complained about technology constantly, who could barely operate the museum's computer system, had a second phone. I spent the morning in a fog, mechanically organizing inventory while my mind raced. By lunch, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed air, perspective, and the strongest coffee in town. Millbrook's downtown stretched along Main Street like something out of a Stephen King novel, all brick buildings and narrow alleys where secrets liked to hide. The Grind, our local coffee shop, buzzed with the usual crowd of professors, students, and townspeople who thrived on gossip. I claimed my usual corner table and was halfway through a double espresso when she appeared. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" I looked up into the face of an absolutely stunning Asian woman, maybe 40, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to see straight through me. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than my monthly book orders, and her smile had an edge that made my pulse quicken. "Actually, I was just Gregory Hayes, right? Owner of the bookstore?" She slid into the chair across from me without waiting for permission. "I'm Laura Chen. I work at the university library." Something about the way she said my name, like she'd been thinking about it for a while, made me nervous. "Do we know each other?" Her smile widened, showing perfect white teeth. Not yet, but we have something in common. She leaned forward, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. Your wife is sleeping with my husband. The coffee shop noise faded to a dull roar. My vision tunneled until all I could see was Laura's face, calm and collected while my world imploded. I'm sorry, what? Serena Bell Hayes and Professor Evan Miller, my husband. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, swiping through photos with practiced efficiency. They've been meeting at the Riverside Inn every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months. Sometimes they drive to Albany for weekend conferences that don't exist. She turned the phone toward me, and I found myself staring at a crystal-clear photograph of my wife, locked in a passionate kiss with a man I'd never seen before. They were standing beside a hotel room door, her hands tangled in his graying hair, his hands on her ass like he owned her. Jesus Christ. The words came out as a croak. Professor Miller teaches European history at the college. 46 years old, married to me for 12 years, father of my 10-year-old daughter. Laura's voice stayed perfectly level, like she was reciting a grocery list. He's been telling me he's working late on his book about medieval trade routes. Apparently, the only thing he's been researching is your wife's anatomy. I stared at the photo until my eyes burned. Serena looked happier than I'd seen her in years, her face flushed with desire, her body pressed against this stranger like she couldn't get close enough. How long have you known? I managed. 2 months. I hired a private investigator when Evan started coming home smelling like expensive perfume. Your wife has very distinctive taste in fragrance. Laura swiped to another photo, Serena and Evan entering the hotel together, his hand on the small of her back. Chanel No. 5, right? My grandmother's favorite perfume, the one I'd bought Serena for our anniversary every year since we'd met, the one she'd been wearing more frequently lately, claiming she'd rediscovered it. Why are you telling me this? My voice sounded foreign, hollow. Laura leaned back in her chair, studying me like I was a particularly interesting book. Because I'm tired of being the only one who knows. Because they think they're so clever, sneaking around, lying to our faces. Because I want them to pay for what they've done. She swiped to another photo, this one showing Serena and Evan at a restaurant I recognized. The expensive French place where she'd claimed to have dinner with museum board members last month. Your wife charged that dinner to the museum's expense account, Laura continued. I checked. The Bell Museum has very detailed financial records, and their board takes misuse of funds seriously. My hands clenched into fists on the table. 20 years of marriage, and she was not only cheating, but stealing to pay for it. What do you want from me? I want to destroy them both. Laura's smile turned predatory. Professionally, socially, completely. I want everyone in this pathetic little town to know exactly what kind of people they really are, and I think you're exactly the right person to help me do it. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings, but the rage building in my chest drowned out everything else. I thought about all those late nights, all those business trips, all those times Serena had turned away from me in bed claiming she was too tired. What did you have in mind? Laura's eyes lit up like she'd been waiting for exactly that question. Meet me for dinner tonight, 7 o'clock at Murphy's Pub on 2nd Street. Come alone and bring your appetite for revenge. She stood up, smoothing down her dress, then leaned down until her lips were inches from my ear. Oh, and Gregory? Your wife keeps a second phone in her car's glove compartment. The password is your wedding anniversary. Might be worth a look. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and the photograph still glowing on her phone screen, which she'd left on the table like a calling card. I sat there for another hour, staring at my wife's betrayal in high definition, while the coffee shop buzzed around me. Students complained about exams, professors gossiped about department politics, and somewhere in Boston my wife was probably naked with another man. By the time I walked back to my shop, I'd made my decision. Murphy's Pub squatted on 2nd Street like an old bulldog, all dark wood and neon beer signs. The kind of place where professors went to drink away their tenure anxieties and townspeople gathered to dissect their neighbor's business. Perfect for what Laura had in mind. I found her in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey and reading what looked like a leather-bound journal. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater, but somehow looked even more dangerous in casual clothes. "You came," she said, closing the journal and sliding it across the table. "I wasn't sure you would." I checked the glove compartment. I sat down heavily, signaling the waitress for a double bourbon. Found the phone, found the texts. Laura's expression softened slightly. How bad? Bad enough. I'd spent 2 hours reading through months of messages between my wife and her lover, detailed discussions of hotel rooms and positions, complaints about their respective spouses, plans for a future that didn't include me. She calls me the fossil in her messages, says I'm boring in bed and intellectually beneath her. Evan refers to me as the anchor, Laura replied. Says I'm holding him back from his true potential. Apparently his true potential involves screwing museum curators in cheap hotels. The waitress brought my drink, and I downed half of it in one swallow. "So what's your plan?" Laura opened the journal and turned it toward me. Inside, she'd created detailed profiles of both our spouses, schedules, weaknesses, professional vulnerabilities, financial information. It looked like something a detective would compile. Serena's position at the museum depends entirely on her reputation for integrity and proper management of funds, Laura began, her finger tracing notes she'd made in neat handwriting. The board is made up of conservative old-money families who value discretion above everything else. A scandal involving misuse of museum resources would be career suicide. I studied her notes. She documented every dinner, every hotel stay, every expense Serena had charged to the museum while conducting her affair. The total came to over $3,000. Evan's even more vulnerable, Laura continued, flipping to another page. He's up for department chair next year, and the college has strict policies about faculty conduct. An affair with someone connected to a major donor, the Bell family endowed a significant scholarship, would end his academic career permanently. You want to expose them publicly. I want to destroy them systematically. Laura's voice carried a cold satisfaction that made me shiver. But it has to look natural, like their own mistakes caught up with them. We can't appear vindictive or it'll backfire. She outlined her strategy with military precision. First, anonymous tips to the museum board about expense account irregularities. Then leaked information to the college newspaper about Evan's inappropriate relationships. Finally, public humiliation at the museum's annual gala next month, where both our spouses would be forced to face their peers while their secrets unraveled. "What about evidence?" I asked. Laura smiled and pulled out a small recording device. "I've been documenting everything for 2 months. Audio recordings of Evan's phone calls with your wife, photographs of them together, copies of financial records. I also have a friend in the museum's accounting department who's willing to provide internal documents." "Why haven't you done this already?" "Because I needed a partner, someone with access to your wife's information, someone with reason to hate them as much as I do." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "And because I wanted them to suffer together, the way they made us suffer." I thought about Serena's face in those photographs, radiant with happiness she'd never shown me. About 20 years of marriage reduced to complaints about a fossil husband. About the second phone hidden like a dirty secret. "I'm in." Laura's smile was sharp as a blade. "Good, because I already made the first move." She showed me her phone, displaying an email she'd sent an hour earlier to the museum's board chairman. The subject line read, "Concerns about expense account management. Anonymous tip about irregularities in the curator's travel expenses," she explained. "Nothing specific, just enough to trigger an internal audit. By the time your wife gets back from Boston," She'll be walking into a shitstorm. My phone buzzed with a text from Serena. Conference going well, miss you. I showed it to Laura, who laughed bitterly. Evan sent me the same message, word for word. They're not even creative liars. We spent the next 2 hours planning our campaign of destruction. Laura had thought of everything: backup plans, contingencies, ways to stay anonymous while maximizing damage. She'd been preparing for war while I'd been moping around my bookstore like a wounded animal. There's one more thing, she said as we prepared to leave. This partnership works both ways. I help you destroy your wife, you help me destroy my husband. But that's all this is. Business. Understood. I mean it, Gregory. I know how these situations can get complicated, especially when emotions are running high. We're allies, not lovers. Don't confuse revenge with romance. I nodded, though something about the way she said it made me think she was reminding herself, as much as warning me. We left Murphy's separately, but not before Laura handed me a burner phone. For coordination, she explained. Keep it hidden. From now on, we communicate only through this. Walking back to my empty house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. For the first time since discovering Serena's betrayal, I wasn't just angry, I was planning. The next morning brought the first results of our campaign. Tommy arrived at the shop with news from his girlfriend, who worked at the museum. Dude, something's going down at the Bell Museum, he said, practically vibrating with excitement. Emergency board meeting yesterday evening. Word is they're auditing all expense accounts going back 6 months. Really? I tried to sound surprised while my heart raced with satisfaction. Yeah, and get this. They specifically mentioned concerns about travel expenses and entertainment costs. Your wife's gonna have some explaining to do when she gets back. My burner phone buzzed with a text from Laura. Phase 1 successful. Museum board demanding full financial review. Your wife's phone has been blowing up with calls from the chairman. I checked Serena's regular phone, which she'd left charging on our kitchen counter. 17 missed calls, all from museum board members. Her professional world was already crumbling, and she didn't even know it yet. That afternoon, Laura and I met at the college library to plan our next move. She'd chosen a secluded corner of the rare books section, surrounded by volumes so old and dusty that nobody ever ventured back there. Evan's getting nervous, she reported, showing me screenshots of text messages between our spouses. Your wife told him about the board meeting. They're talking about being more careful, maybe taking a break from seeing each other. Too late for that, I replied, handing her a manila envelope. I had Tommy do some digging into Evan's academic record. Turns out your husband has been padding his research credentials for years. Half the conferences he claims to have attended don't exist. Laura's eyes widened as she read through Tommy's findings. This is perfect. Academic fraud is grounds for immediate termination, even with tenure. Gets better. He's been claiming travel reimbursements for fake conferences while using the money to pay for hotel rooms with my wife. The college takes financial impropriety very seriously. You've been busy. I had a good teacher. I met her eyes across the table, noting how the afternoon light caught the gold flecks in her brown irises. For a moment, the careful professional distance between us wavered. Then her phone rang, shattering the moment. Evan's name appeared on the screen. I have to take this, she said, answering with a perfectly innocent voice. Hi, honey. How was your day? I listened to her side of the conversation, marveling at how easily she lied. Yes, she was at the library working late. No, she hadn't heard any gossip about problems at the museum. Of course she still loved him. When she hung up, her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the pain underneath her calculated revenge. He's scared, she said quietly. Asking if I've heard anything about investigations at the college. Apparently, someone sent an anonymous tip to the dean's office about faculty misconduct. Someone? Her smile returned, cold and satisfied. Phase 2 is already in motion. By tomorrow morning, both our spouses will be fighting fires on multiple fronts, and we're just getting started. As we left the library together, I caught myself watching the way she moved, the confidence in her stride, the intelligence in her eyes. Laura Chen was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with our shared mission of revenge. But she was right about keeping things professional. We were allies in destruction, nothing more. At least that's what I told myself as I drove home to my empty house, already planning our next strike against the people who'd betrayed us both. Thursday evening arrived with the weight of an execution. Serena's BMW pulled into our driveway at exactly 6:30, her usual precision intact despite the chaos waiting for her inside the house. I watched from our living room window as she sat in the car for several minutes, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing frantically. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. When she finally came inside, she looked like she'd aged 5 years in 3 days. "Gregory?" Her voice carried a forced cheerfulness that didn't match her hollow eyes. "I'm home." "Welcome back, sweetheart." I didn't get up from my chair, just kept reading my book like nothing had changed. "How was the symposium?" "Fine. Educational." She dropped her suitcase by the door and headed straight for the kitchen, where I heard her pour a large glass of wine. "There were some interesting developments while I was away." "Oh?" She returned with her wine, settling into the chair across from me with careful precision. Everything about her screamed guilty conscience, the way she avoided eye contact, the slight tremor in her hands, the defensive set of her jaw. "The museum board has some concerns about our expense reporting procedures. Nothing serious, just bureaucratic nonsense. They want to review some travel costs from the past few months." I looked up from my book, letting my expression show mild interest. "Sounds tedious. I'm sure you'll sort it out." "Of course." She took a large gulp of wine. "It's just frustrating when board members don't understand the complexities of museum operations. Sometimes networking requires flexibility in how we categorize expenses." Flexibility. I tasted the word like it was something rotten. Interesting way to put it. Something in my tone made her look at me sharply. For a moment, we stared at each other across the coffee table that had witnessed 20 years of conversations, and I saw the exact instant she realized I knew something was wrong. "Gregory, is everything okay? You seem different." "Different how?" "I don't know. Distant. Cold." She leaned forward, trying to recapture some version of intimacy we'd lost years ago. "Did something happen while I was away?" My phone buzzed with a text, not the burner phone Laura and I used for coordination, but my regular phone. The message was from an unknown number. "Check your email. Time for Phase 3. L." "Just work stuff," I said, standing up. "I should check on some orders that came in today." I left her sitting there with her wine and her guilt, heading to my home office where I opened my laptop with hands that barely trembled. Laura's email contained a single attachment, a video file labeled Museum Gala Preview. The video showed security footage from the Riverside Inn, time-stamped from 2 weeks ago. Serena and Evan entering a room together, his hand on her lower back, her head thrown back in laughter. The quality was crystal clear, their faces unmistakable. Below the video, Laura had written, "Tomorrow night, Murphy's Pub, time to discuss the grand finale." From the living room, I heard Serena making phone calls, her voice low and urgent. Damage control mode, trying to shore up her professional relationships before the scandal broke wide open. Too late for that, I thought, saving the video to a secure folder. Way too late. Friday evening at Murphy's, Laura looked like a woman who'd been sleeping well for the first time in months. She'd claimed a booth in the back corner again, but this time she wasn't alone. A young woman with short blonde hair and nervous eyes sat across from her. "Gregory, meet Jill Patterson." Laura said, as I slid into the booth. She works in the museum's administrative office. Jill, this is the friend I mentioned. Jill looked like she wanted to disappear into the worn vinyl seating. I don't know about this, Laura. If anyone finds out I'm involved— No one will find out, Laura assured her, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made people believe her. You're just providing information that should be public anyway. Museum donors have a right to know how their contributions are being used. I studied Jill's face, recognizing the expression of someone caught between loyalty and conscience. How long have you worked with my wife? 3 years, Jill replied quietly. She hired me straight out of college. I always looked up to her, you know? She seemed so professional, so dedicated to the museum's mission. Seemed? Jill glanced at Laura, who nodded encouragingly. The expense account irregularities go back almost a year. At first I thought maybe she was just bad at categorizing things. But when I started paying closer attention— She pulled a manila folder from her purse, hands shaking slightly. Hotel charges listed as conference accommodations for events that don't exist. Restaurant bills marked as donor meetings with people who aren't museum supporters. Travel expenses for trips that aren't on the official museum calendar. Laura opened the folder, revealing months of financial documents that painted a clear picture of systematic fraud. How much total? Almost $8,000, Jill whispered. And that's just what I found in the files I have access to. There could be more. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. $8,000 of stolen money to fund an affair. The museum board would crucify Serena when they saw this evidence. There's something else, Jill continued, pulling out a small digital recorder. Yesterday, after the board meeting, I heard Mrs. Hayes on the phone in her office. She was talking to someone about covering their tracks, making sure their stories matched. She pressed play, and Serena's voice filled our corner of the pub. Evan, we need to be smart about this. The board is asking questions, but they don't have proof of anything yet. If we stick to our story about legitimate business expenses, we can ride this out. No, I can't see you right now. It's too risky. Of course I love you, but we have to think about our careers. Meet me Sunday at the usual place. We'll figure this out together. The recording ended, leaving us in silence. Jill looked sick, like she'd betrayed her own family. Why are you doing this? I asked her gently. Because it's not fair. Her voice gained strength as she spoke. The museum struggles for funding every year. We've had to cut educational programs, reduce staff hours, delay important conservation work. And she's been stealing money to pay for her affair like it's some kind of corporate expense account. Laura reached across the table and squeezed Jill's hand. You're doing the right thing. Museums are public trusts. The community deserves better. We spent the next hour planning the final phase of our campaign. The museum's annual gala was scheduled for the following Saturday, a black tie fundraising event that drew the town's social elite, major donors, and academic community. Both Serena and Evan would be there, playing their roles as respected professionals while their worlds collapsed around them. I can get you access to the gala's AV system, Jill offered. I'm helping with setup, and I know the technical crew. If you had something you wanted to share with the audience. Laura's smile was predatory. As a matter of fact, we do. After Jill left, Laura and I sat in comfortable silence, nursing our drinks and savoring the anticipation of victory. The pub's Friday night crowd buzzed around us, oblivious to the destruction being planned in their midst. How are you holding up? Laura asked eventually. Better than I expected. It was true. The initial devastation of discovering Serena's betrayal had crystallized into something harder and more focused. What about you? I haven't felt this alive in years. She met my eyes across the table, and I saw something dangerous flickering there. Is that terrible? That destroying my marriage is the most energized I've felt since my daughter was born? If it's terrible, then we're both monsters. Maybe we are. She raised her glass in a mock toast. To monsters, then, and to the people who made us this way. We clinked glasses, sealing our partnership in revenge with the solemnity of a wedding vow. Around us, Murphy's Pub continued its Friday night ritual of small-town socializing, while two betrayed spouses planned the kind of public humiliation that would be talked about for years. 1 week until the gala. 1 week until Serena and Evan faced the consequences of their choices in front of everyone who mattered in their professional lives. I drove home that night with a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in months. Serena was already asleep, or pretending to be, when I slipped into our bed. She'd left her regular phone on the nightstand, and I could see the glow of unread messages through her screensaver. Tomorrow, I'd check the burner phone she kept hidden in her car. Not because I needed more evidence, we had plenty of that, but because I wanted to watch her panic as her carefully constructed lies fell apart piece by piece. Some people collect stamps or coins. I was collecting moments of my wife's fear, storing them up for the grand finale that would make everything worthwhile. The week leading up to the museum gala passed like a fever dream of coordinated destruction. Every day brought fresh evidence of our spouses' panic as their professional worlds began to crumble with surgical precision. Monday morning, Tommy arrived at the bookstore with gossip from his girlfriend at the museum. "Emergency staff meeting yesterday," he reported, practically bouncing with excitement. "Word is the board brought in external auditors. Your wife looked like she'd seen a ghost." I tried to look appropriately concerned while my heart sang with satisfaction. "That sounds serious." "Gets better. Apparently, she tried to throw some junior staff under the bus, claiming they must have miscategorized expenses, but the auditors have documentation proving she personally approved every questionable charge." That evening, Laura and I met at our usual spot in the library's rare book section. She looked radiant in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or clothing, the glow of someone watching a carefully laid plan come to fruition. "Evan's department chair called him in for a meeting today," she reported, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "Apparently the dean received several anonymous tips about faculty misconduct. They're opening a formal investigation." "Several tips?" "I may have sent information from multiple email addresses, using different writing styles and focusing on various aspects of his fraud." Her smile was sharp as a scalpel. "Academic institutions take these things very seriously when the evidence comes from multiple sources." Inside the envelope were printouts of emails she'd sent to various college administrators, each one perfectly crafted to seem like it came from a different concerned party. A graduate student worried about grade inflation, a fellow faculty member concerned about research integrity, a community member questioning travel expense reports. "You've been busy. I've been thorough." She leaned back in her chair, studying my face with those intelligent eyes. "How's your wife handling the pressure?" "Like a cornered animal. She's been making phone calls all week, trying to line up character references and political support on the museum board. Yesterday I heard her crying in the bathroom." "Good." Laura's voice carried no sympathy whatsoever. "Let her cry. Let her feel a fraction of what we felt when we discovered their betrayal." Tuesday brought the first public crack in their facades. Serena came home from work pale and shaking, her usual composure completely shattered. "They've suspended me," she announced without preamble, dropping her purse by the door like it weighed 100 pounds. "Pending the outcome of the audit." I looked up from my dinner, letting my expression show appropriate shock. "Suspended? Why?" "Irregularities in expense reporting." She poured herself a large glass of wine with hands that trembled visibly. "They claim I've been misusing museum funds for personal expenses." "Have you?" The question hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. Serena stared at me, and I saw the moment she realized this wasn't just bureaucratic harassment. Someone knew the truth. "Of course not," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is obviously some kind of political attack. The board chairman never liked the direction I was taking the museum. I'm sure you'll clear it up. Gregory, she sat down across from me, reaching for my hand with desperate familiarity. I need you to know that whatever they're saying, whatever accusations they're making, I would never do anything to jeopardize the museum's reputation. Her skin felt cold against mine, and I had to resist the urge to pull away. What kind of accusations? They think I've been charging personal expenses to the museum account. Hotel stays, dinners, travel costs that weren't related to museum business. She squeezed my hand tighter. But you know me, Gregory. You know I would never steal from the institution my grandfather built. Of course not, I agreed, letting her hear what she wanted to hear while my mind cataloged every lie she'd just told. We'll get through this together. The relief on her face was almost pathetic. She actually believed I was still the loyal, oblivious husband she'd been deceiving for months. Wednesday evening, my burner phone buzzed with an urgent message from Laura. Emergency meeting, Murphy's, now. I found her in our usual booth, but this time she wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize sat across from her, mid-40s, graying hair, the soft build of someone who spent more time with books than barbells. Even without an introduction, I knew I was looking at Professor Evan Miller. Gregory Hayes, Laura said as I approached, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. Meet my husband. Evan looked like he wanted to disappear into the booth's cracked vinyl. His face was pale and sweaty, his eyes darting between Laura and me like a trapped animal seeking escape routes. I don't understand, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Laura, why is he here? What's going on? What's going on, Laura replied with icy precision, is that your affair with his wife is about to become very public knowledge. What's going on is that your career is over, your reputation is destroyed, and your marriage is finished. I slid into the booth next to Laura, studying the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. He was smaller than I'd expected, softer, with the kind of academic arrogance that crumbled at the first sign of real consequences. You're Serena's husband, Evan said, the words coming out like an accusation. She said you didn't know. Serena says a lot of things, I replied, most of them lies. Laura pulled out her phone and began scrolling through photos with deliberate slowness. Should we show him the hotel pictures, Gregory? Or maybe start with the financial records? Please, Evan whispered, his face going even paler. You don't understand. It's not what you think. Really? I leaned forward, letting him see the anger I'd been controlling for weeks. Then explain to me what it is, Professor. Explain how you've been sleeping with my wife in hotel rooms paid for with stolen museum funds. It just happened, he said desperately. We met at a conference, we connected intellectually, and things just evolved. Evolved. Laura's voice dripped contempt. Is that what you call it when you lie to your wife about working late while you're screwing someone else's spouse? Evan looked between us with growing panic. What do you want? Money? I can pay you to keep quiet about this. The offer hung in the air like a bad smell. Laura and I exchanged glances, and I saw my own disgust reflected in her eyes. We don't want your money, I said quietly. We want justice. The museum gala is tomorrow night, Laura continued. You and Serena will be there, playing your roles as respected professionals. But this time, everyone will know exactly what kind of people you really are. She showed him her phone screen, the security footage from the Riverside Inn, crystal clear and undeniably damning. This video will be shown to every museum donor, every faculty member, every community leader who attends the gala, she said, along with documentation of the financial fraud you've both committed. Evan's face crumpled like wet paper. You can't do this. Think about my daughter, my career, the students who depend on me. You should have thought about that before you decided to betray your family, I replied. Actions have consequences, Professor. Tomorrow night, you'll face yours. We left him sitting in the booth, staring at his phone like it might offer some escape from the trap we'd built around him. Outside Murphy's pub, Laura and I stood in the cool evening air, breathing in the satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. "One more day," she said quietly. "One more day," I agreed. Tomorrow night, the museum gala would become the stage for the most spectacular public humiliation our small town had ever witnessed, and Serena and Evan would have front-row seats for their own destruction. I drove home to find my wife pacing our living room, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice high with barely controlled panic. She was trying to reach board members, calling in favors, desperately attempting to control a narrative that had already spiraled beyond her influence. When she saw me, she ended her call abruptly and forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "How was your evening?" she asked with false casualness. "Quiet," I replied. "Just had a drink at Murphy's. You seem stressed." "Tomorrow's gala is important. Despite everything that's happening, I need to show the community that the museum remains strong and focused on its mission. Of course, I'm sure everything will work out perfectly." She had no idea how perfectly everything would work out. No idea that tomorrow night would be the last time she appeared in public as a respected member of our community. I went to bed that night with a sense of completion I hadn't felt in years. 20 years of marriage were about to end in the most public way possible, and I found myself looking forward to it with the anticipation of a child on Christmas morning. Some gifts are worth waiting for. Saturday evening arrived with the crisp promise of autumn, the kind of night that made Millbrook look like a postcard. The Bell Museum glowed with warm light, its marble steps crowded with the town's elite dressed in their finest formal wear. I adjusted my black tie in the rearview mirror of my rented BMW, a small indulgence for the evening that would end my marriage. Through the museum's tall windows, I could see the crowd gathering in the main hall, champagne glasses catching the light from crystal chandeliers that had witnessed decades of similar events. None quite like tonight's, though. My phone buzzed with a text from Laura. "In position. AV system ready. Break a leg." I pocketed the phone and walked up the museum steps, nodding to acquaintances who had no idea they were about to witness the social event of the decade. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Bell Museum, named after Serena's grandfather, would become the stage for her complete professional destruction. Inside, the gala was already in full swing. The museum's main hall had been transformed into an elegant party space, with cocktail tables scattered among the permanent exhibits and a small stage set up near the far wall. Donors mingled with faculty members, local politicians worked the room with practiced charm, and museum staff circulated with trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres. I spotted Serena immediately. She stood near the Egyptian sarcophagus display, wearing a stunning black evening gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, her makeup flawless, her smile bright and confident as she charmed a group of major donors. She looked absolutely beautiful. She also looked like a woman who had no idea her world was about to implode. "Gregory!" She broke away from her conversation and glided over, kissing my cheek with practiced affection. "You look handsome. Thank you for being here tonight." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, studying her face for signs of the stress I knew she was feeling. Up close, I could see the tension around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach them. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected. I think we're going to weather this audit situation just fine." Her voice carried forced confidence. "The board realizes they may have overreacted to some administrative concerns." "That's good to hear." She squeezed my arm, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd married 20 years ago. "I know things have been difficult between us lately. After tonight, after we get past all this nonsense, maybe we can work on reconnecting." The tragedy of it hit me like a physical blow. Even now, even after months of betrayal and lies, part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to grab her hand and walk out of here, away from Laura's plan, away from the public humiliation that was minutes away from beginning. Instead, I nodded and smiled. I'd like that. Across the room, I spotted Professor Evan Miller near the wine bar. He looked terrible, pale, sweaty, his formal wear hanging on him like he'd lost weight in the past week. His eyes kept darting around the room like he expected security guards to appear at any moment. "Is that Professor Miller?" I asked Serena, nodding in his direction. She followed my gaze, and I saw her face tighten almost imperceptibly. "Yes. He's here representing the college's history department. We've been working together on some joint educational programs. He looks nervous. Academic events can be intimidating for people who aren't used to major fundraising galas." She was already turning away, steering me toward another group of guests. "Come on, I want you to meet the Hendersons. They're considering a major donation for our new contemporary art wing." For the next hour, I played the role of supportive husband, making small talk with donors and community leaders while internally counting down to the moment everything would change. Serena was in her element, charming wealthy patrons and discussing museum programs with the kind of passionate expertise that had made me fall in love with her in the first place. At 8:30, the museum director took the stage to begin the evening's formal program. Dr. Patricia Westbrook was a distinguished woman in her 60s, with silver hair and the kind of authoritative presence that commanded attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bell Museum's annual gala," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Tonight we celebrate not only our institution's proud history, but also our exciting plans for the future." I scanned the crowd until I found Laura. She stood near the AV control booth, elegant in a navy blue evening gown, her expression calm and focused. When our eyes met across the room, she gave me the slightest nod. Showtime. Dr. Westbrook continued her opening remarks, discussing the museum's achievements over the past year and introducing key staff members. When she called Serena to the stage for recognition, my wife walked forward with confident grace, accepting applause from the crowd like she deserved every bit of it. "Our curator, Serena Bell Hayes, has been instrumental in developing several groundbreaking exhibitions this year," Dr. Westbrook announced. "Her dedication to the museum's mission and her careful stewardship of our resources have been exemplary." Careful stewardship. The irony was almost too perfect. Serena took the microphone with practiced ease. "Thank you, Dr. Westbrook. The Bell Museum has been my life's work, and I'm honored to serve this community's cultural needs. Tonight's gala represents not just a fundraising event, but a celebration of the trust you've placed in our institution." Trust. Another word that would taste like ashes in a few minutes. "Before we continue with tonight's program," Serena continued, "I'd like to take a moment to address some recent concerns that have been raised about museum operations." I felt my pulse quicken. She was going off script, trying to get ahead of the scandal before it broke. "As many of you know, our financial records have been subjected to additional scrutiny recently. I want to assure you that any irregularities that may have been identified are the result of administrative oversight, not intentional misconduct." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the kind of thing typically discussed at social events, and people were starting to look uncomfortable. "The Bell Museum maintains the highest standards of fiscal responsibility," Serena continued, her voice gaining strength. "Any suggestion otherwise is simply—" The lights dimmed suddenly, and the large screen behind the stage flickered to life. Serena turned, confusion replacing confidence on her face, as the opening frame of Laura's video appeared. Security footage from the Riverside Inn. Date and timestamp clearly visible. Two figures entering the frame, unmistakably Serena and Evan Miller. The crowd's murmur turned into shocked silence as they watched my wife and her lover embrace passionately in the hotel corridor. Serena's face on the screen was radiant with desire, her hands tangled in Evan's hair as he pressed her against the door of their room. "Turn it off," Serena said into the microphone, her voice cracking. Turn it off now! But the video continued. More footage, different dates, showing their affair progressing over months. Hotel entrances, restaurant meetings, intimate moments captured with crystal clarity. I found Evan in the crowd. He was backing toward the exit, his face white with terror, but several museum security guards had appeared near the doors. There was nowhere to run. The screen changed to display financial records, hotel bills, restaurant charges, travel expenses, all marked as museum business expenses, all coinciding with the dates in the security footage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Laura's voice came through the sound system, clear and authoritative. She'd taken control of the microphone from somewhere in the crowd. "What you're seeing is documentation of systematic fraud committed by museum curator Serena Hayes and college professor Evan Miller." The crowd erupted. Donors began talking angrily among themselves. Faculty members pulled out phones to record the chaos, and society reporters who'd come to cover a routine fundraising event suddenly found themselves documenting the scandal of the year. Serena stood frozen on the stage, the microphone still in her hand, staring at the screen that displayed her betrayal in high definition. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. This isn't what it looks like. It looks like you've been stealing museum funds to pay for your affair," Dr. Westbrook said, her voice cutting through the chaos with surgical precision. "It looks like you've violated every principle of professional conduct and public trust." I watched my wife's face crumble as 20 years of professional reputation disintegrated in real time. The woman who'd built her identity around cultural sophistication and institutional integrity was being revealed as a common thief and adulteress in front of everyone who mattered in her world. The video ended, but the damage was complete. Board members were already clustering together in urgent conversation. Donors were heading for the exits in disgust, and someone had called the police. I could see flashing lights through the museum's tall windows. Serena's eyes found mine in the crowd, and I saw the moment she realized I wasn't just a witness to her destruction. I was its architect. "You," she whispered into the microphone, the word carrying clearly through the sound system. "You did this." I smiled at her across the room, letting her see the satisfaction in my face. "You did this, Serena. I just made sure everyone could see it." Security guards were moving toward the stage now, and I knew it was time to leave. I'd gotten what I came for, the complete and public destruction of my wife's career and reputation. Everything else was just cleanup. As I walked toward the exit, I passed Professor Miller being questioned by museum security. He was crying, his formal wear disheveled, his academic dignity in ruins. "Please," I heard him saying, "I have a daughter. I have students depending on me." "You should have thought of that before you decided to betray your family," I replied, not bothering to stop. Outside the museum, Laura waited by the valet stand, her face glowing with satisfaction. The cool night air carried the sound of sirens and angry voices from inside the building. "How do you feel?" she asked as I approached. "Complete," I said, and meant it. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching through the museum's windows as our carefully planned revenge reached its perfect conclusion. Police officers were taking statements, board members were demanding answers, and somewhere inside, two people who'd thought they were clever enough to betray their spouses without consequences were learning exactly how wrong they'd been. "What happens now?" Laura asked. "Now they face the consequences of their choices," I replied, "and we get to watch." The museum gala had become exactly what we'd planned. Not a celebration of cultural achievement, but a public execution of two people who'd forgotten that actions have consequences. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.